All right, so thank you everyone for attending and welcome to the 2023 AFC seminar series. Today our talk is on the origins of human cooperation and will be given by Professor Michael Tomasello. Before we start, just like to give a brief introduction. So Professor Tomasello is a James Bonk Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience at Duke University. He also holds secondary appointments at Duke as Professor in Evolutionary Anthropology, as well as Philosophy. From 1998 until 2018, he served as the co-director of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. And from 2001 to 2018, served as the co-director of the Wolfgang Kohler Primate Research Center. He has served on the editorial boards of 15 different journals, been elected as a fellow to 8 different academic societies, and his research primarily focuses on understanding the development and evolution of human cooperation, social cognition, and communication. And he's especially known for his work in developmental and comparative psychology. A few of the books he's authored include Becoming Human, A Theory of Ontogeny, The Cultural Origins of Human Cognition, Natural History of Human Thinking, Constructing a Language, Primate Cognition, Origins of Human Communication, and most relevant to today, Why We Cooperate. So I could go on listing his academic achievements and wide variety of interests, but I know you're all eager to learn about today's topic. So with that, let's please welcome Professor Michael Tomasello.
Thank you very much for that generous introduction. In the study of human evolution, one of the major topics, of course, is the evolution of cooperation in general. Darwin worried about the evolution of cooperation and the problems it presents, and there have been all kinds of theoretical attempts to address the question. A lot of the people who are worried about that question are really defining cooperation as altruism. So they're worried about how to explain individuals sacrificing for one another. I believe that if we want to understand the evolution of human cooperation in general, the place to start is collaboration. So collaboration, co-labor, working together, and that is mutualistic. So it does not present an evolutionary problem because all of the individuals participating are benefiting. And so it doesn't present the challenge that the evolution of altruism does. So I actually think that the key to understanding much of humans' uniqueness in terms of their unique cognitive capacities, their unique forms of social interaction, I think really the key is not altruism, but mutualism and humans learning to work together for mutual benefit. And so the origin of that is going to be co-labor, collaboration. So a lot of you may know that the closest chimpanzees and humans' closest great ape relatives, and I'm going to stick with chimpanzees because that's the one where we have the most research. Chimpanzees do hunt together in groups for red colobus monkeys. And my colleague in Leipzig, Christoph Bosch, claimed that they were collaborating in a human-like way, and he assigned them names of roles. One was the driver, one was the blocker, etc. But that's, I think, an overly generous interpretation of what's going on. As you know, there are social carnivores like lions and hyenas that successfully hunt in groups and surround prey. And so the more individualistic interpretation is that each chimp is sort of trying to get the monkey for itself. He knows that he needs others to do it and so forth. But you can tell that because when they capture it, they really would prefer to eat it all themselves. And they actually try to steal away with it if they possibly can. And you look at human hunter-gatherers, and when they cooperatively hunt for something and they get the prey, what they typically do with it is give it to one of the teenage boys hanging around to take back to the camp to share all around. So I'm not going to go into all the details, but I favor the more individualistic interpretation. And a lot of the studies that we have done and that I'm going to tell you about this evening are trying to look carefully at what's going on with chimps versus children when they do work together. So the proposal is that I've been developing for working on a second decade here, is that the apes are really operating with what I would call individual intentionality. They're acting intentionally. We have studies that I'm not going to go over today, but that show that they understand others' intentions and attention. But they do this mainly in competition. So some of our early studies, we actually were unable to find chimps understanding others as having goals and understanding others as seeing things, sort of theory of mind kind of things. They were failing. But once we put them in competition with one another, all of a sudden they were doing really well. So they're acting as individuals, and they can read other minds, generously speaking, but when they're competing with them. What happened in human evolution, in my hypothesis, is that humans not only could read others' intentions, but now we can put our heads together and form have a shared intention for mutual benefit. That's another definition of the term mutualism in the human version, that we have shared intention for mutual benefit. When we're doing that, we have shared attention, joint attention, shared attention, and shared knowledge about the situation. And we involve ourselves in social coordination, especially with communication. I have a book on the origins of human communication that basically argues that the origin of humans' unique forms of communication, which includes not only language, but pointing and iconic gestures, that the origin of those is the function of those, the original evolutionary function of those, is to coordinate collaborative activities, right? So the social coordination is really important. And when you look at chimpanzees, when you're going to see in a moment some things where they do work together, but I've been looking at this for 20 years or so, and they almost never actively communicate when they are collaborating, when they're working together. Yes, when they are hunting monkeys, if the monkey comes close to one of them, they scream, and everybody can tell, oh, he's almost got him or something. So the other ones can read this scream, but the individual who screams is not doing it in order to inform others that the monkey is over here. So they really just aren't built to coordinate their group activity by communicating, not in the case of something like the hunting for monkeys. So just as a way, a kind of an encapsulating phrase that to help capture it, we say that the chimps are, when they're working together, they're using one another as social tools. And humans are engaging in shared intentionality, where we are doing it together. Shared intentionality is sometimes called we intentionality. We are doing it together, and we are going to share the spoils at the end, since we did it together. So yes, the shared agent we. So in evolution, I know you guys are an archaeological society, so you're interested mainly in evolution. And I proposed, my colleagues and I proposed back in 2012, the 2 steps in the evolution of human cooperation. And the first one, and I have in a couple of my books since then, I've used this typology here. Well, I guess 2 categories is a little generous to call that a typology, but this 2 steps. And the first is uniquely human forms of collaboration, and I call that joint intentionality, because it's mainly between 2 individuals. In a crowd like this, I don't want to get bogged down in speculating about dates, but I have speculated that it was consolidated by Homo heidelbergensis 400,000 years ago. I think it probably started more like 1 million years ago. So let's say 1 million to 500,000 years ago, something like that. We see real good signs of collaborative hunting for large game, where one individual couldn't do it on their own. This has also appeared where we probably get cooperative breeding. There's lots of speculation about when that occurred, when that arose in the human lineage, but I would say at least by then. So they're doing some collaborative things back before it's modern humans. And then culture, and again, it depends on how you define culture, but culture, I would say, again, is clearly consolidated. We clearly have indisputable evidence by, let's just say 100,000 years ago. If somebody wants to go back to 200 or move it up to 50, that's fine. It's somewhere in with modern humans. So those are the two forms of collaboration. One is individuals collaborating with one another, and the other one is collaborating in the group as a whole. So in the group as a whole, we're making joint decisions about where to forage, where to move the group, where to settle down. And of course, we have to collaborate to defend ourselves if there's some other group around. So it's more group-minded things. And I have used a little bit of paleoanthropological evidence, but only of the most general kind. As I say, collaborative foraging is well established in the 1 million to 500,000 years ago, and culture well established by whatever date you want to pick, 100,000 or whatever. And so but that's only very general information, and I don't care about the specific date for my purposes. I just care about the general, more or less general thing. But I've used a form of evidence, I'll put evidence in quotes, that is not common or is not normal in the field of paleoanthropology or archaeology, and that is looking at children. So if we have something that evolved in humans, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago, it's going to manifest itself in ontogeny at some point. We can see the adaptations. They have to come out in ontogeny. And what we have done, as was said at the beginning, I'm mainly a developmental psychologist, and I've become interested in the evolutionary side of things as well. But we can see this joint intentionality, this collaboration among individuals working together toward a joint goal. We can see that in children as young as 1 to 3 years of age. So they work together toward a joint goal. They both know their roles, and they coordinate with various forms of cooperative communication, gestures like pointing and pantomiming, language, of course. So they're doing something I'm going to try to show you in just a minute. They're doing something qualitatively different than the apes already when they're little toddlers. 1 to 3 year old children are pitiful compared to chimpanzees in terms of taking care of themselves. Chimps do all the stuff that mature individuals need to do, and they fight and they mate and they groom and they climb trees and do all that. 1 to 3 year old infants can't even get their own food, right? They can't defend themselves. They can't do anything, but they're already able to put their heads together with others in joint attention and toward joint goals in a way that the apes are not. I'm going to try to argue that and show you that. So it's not that they're smarter or more competent than apes, far from it, but they have this particular adaptation for putting their heads together with others, and we can see it already from 1 to 3 years of age. And then after 3 years of age, 3 or 4, you get collaboration where it has a normative dimension. And I know normative is not something that typically paleoanthropologists and people talk about, because you can't really observe much in that way of that. But normative means things like obligation and morality. And you see on here joint commitment, social norms, fairness. And I have a whole paper on the moral psychology of obligation. And so when you get to the group level, everyone has an obligation to, look out for the group and to do certain things to play their role. I think that's a key part of the evolution of human cultures, is not just, I prefer to hang around with these people, but it's that I am a member, I identify with this group, and I have an obligation, to help and play my role. So I think you can see these human adaptations for collaboration and cooperation. I think you can see them coming out in children in these 2 steps. And obviously that's not evidence of what happened in evolution, but a reasonable interpretation is, when we watch it coming out in children, is that this has an evolutionary history, and we can use the anthropological record, paleoanthropological record, to sort of put some points on it. Okay, so step one, what I'm going to do then is just sort of pose it as a kind of a evolutionary story, but I'm going to use data from children, and you can object to that if you'd like, but that's what I've done. So again, mutualism, joint intentionality, something like 1 million to 500,000 years ago. The idea is obligate collaborative foraging. There comes a time where individuals have to work together to forage, and individuals who don't are left out and they're going to starve. So it's obligate in the sense that you're not going to leave many offspring if you don't do it. So you're interdependent with others. You can't just blow off other people because there's also partner choice. So if you're not a good collaborator, let's say you're not a good communicator, well, then I'm not going to choose you as a partner. If you're not a good collaborator because at the end you try to hog all the food and you don't let me have any, so we both collaborate, but you take all the food, I'm not going to choose you as a partner anymore, and nobody else is either. And when everybody stops choosing you as a partner, that's the end of you, all right, in an obligate collaborative foraging situation. So so that's the idea. That's just a general one example of what is often called social selection. The social group is selecting certain traits in you, and humans, the social group was selecting for the ability to forage collaboratively, and individuals who couldn't do it were weeded out. So that's the sort of just so story of how humans came to were selected to be especially cooperative or collaborative. Now, in young children, we can see, I think, special mechanisms for collaboration. And I'm going to go through each of these 4 here very quickly, just to show you a couple of studies about each one, to show you that the mechanisms by which children collaborate are different from those of chimpanzees today. And so again, you have to take a leap with me here that these young children below 3 years of age and up right at 3 years of age are somehow expressing the adaptations that are coming from 1 million to 500,000 years ago. So I'm just going to let this run and talk over it, because I think this is just really illustrates a lot. This was actually a study about helping. And so you see Felix Farnican here putting away these things, and this is an 18-month-old child, and he doesn't know what's going on. He's just kind of walking around, and now he comes and has a little trouble, and all right, so he opens it and helps him, and then not only that, watch, he's going to tell him where to put them. That was a quick point. He points to the shelf and says, "Put them there." Okay, so okay, so that's helping, because Felix had a problem and he helped him. But now he knows what's going on, and he anticipates and opens the door in anticipation, and once again points. Watch, there, they go there. Right? So now this is a real collaboration. And not only that, but he's going to initiate the ending. He's going to shut the door. He's going to initiate the end of it. So this kid can barely walk. He's a toddler. He's still in diapers, but he can tune in to this other guy and not only form a joint goal with him, but tell the other guy how to play his role by pointing and telling him where they go. Another example of something very similar. This is Felix again, playing a collaboration game with this little 18-month-old again, right? And he has to put it down the right tube to make the fun noise. And the thing, watch, he's going to tease him a little bit. He starts to put it down there, and then he puts it. But look, see, he's smiling, and he doesn't let it go. And now he comes back here. And then the trick is Felix is now going to stop interacting. And now watch what happens. I told you that these guys communicate in a way that apes don't. 18-month-old, he can't even talk. But look at him pointing. He's got his hand stuck in there. He extracts his hand, and now he goes and pulls him over, tells him, do it. Okay. So he doesn't want to do it by himself. We are doing this together, and you're not participating the way you ought to. And he comes and gets him with a communicative act. And again, this is something that we virtually never see in apes, that they actually go recruit their partner when they're not doing their job the right way. These are children a little bit older. They're 3 years old. And this is a study where they are working together, but the rewards are going to come available at different times. So the kid on the left is going to have the reward available first. And you're going to see what happens when the other little girl can't get hers. Her hole is blocked. The girl on the right, her hole is blocked. And now the girl on the left is actually going to be able to get hers, but she doesn't go cash it in. She has to go somewhere to cash it in. And instead of going to cash it in, you're going to see him cash it in at the end. She sees the problem, that her hole is not open. They've got to pull it up higher. She helps him pull it up, and now she gets hers. And now you see how they have to cash it in. Right. So I had a philosopher friend who saw this video, and he said, it's not really like the girl it's not so much that she's being nice and helping her. It's that the activity is not over until we've both got our rewards. This is the nature of the activity, is we do it together until we both get rewarded. All right. So with apes, we've done this study with chimps, a slightly different apparatus. And when they're going like this and they pull together and one of them gets their reward first, guess what? It's over. As soon as I get my reward, it's over. And that's because they're operating like they're using their partner as a social tool. They know they need their partner to get the desired endpoint, but if their partner has not got her reward, it's no big deal. As long as I get mine, that's what I'm in it for. So that's different. Okay, so that's kind of, in some ways, the motivational side of it. And we also did a study showing that children understand the roles. Remember in that video I showed you a minute ago, I said, look, the little boy is pointing because he knows what the other role is supposed to be. We did an experiment of this. This is the outcome here. And the outcome is the chimp is going to play this role B. The collaborative activity doesn't really matter, but he's going to play role B. And the manipulation is, in one case, it's just baseline. He comes over and plays role B, and that tells you how long it takes him to learn role B, how good he gets at it. And in the other condition, the participant condition, he's actually played role B before. So in both cases, the subject is playing role B for the first time. But in one case, it's also his first time in the collaboration. In the other case, he's played the other role previously. And it turns out that 3-year-old children are better if they've played the opposite role first, and chimps, it doesn't matter. So one interpretation is that the children are understanding the other role as they're collaborating, not only their own role, but the other role, and chimps are playing their own role, and the other guy is just a social tool. So what I call the dual level structure of joint intentionality is we have a joint goal, and we have joint attention, but I have my role and my perspective on the situation, and you have your role and your perspective. So I think this is the cognitive kind of structure, that it's both sharedness, shared goal, shared attention, and individual. I have a role and you have a role, and I have my perspective and you have your perspective. And I think actually learning to take perspectives is really key to human cognitive development. And the joint attention is key, because if you just look out one window in the house and I look out another, we just see different things. But if we're looking at the same thing and you're looking at it one way and I'm looking at it another, then we can say, oh, we see the same thing, but differently from different perspectives. Okay, here's a sharing the spoils. And this is from a TV thing, so it has a voice. And the basic idea is that in this apparatus, this board, both of them have to pull a rope. to pull it in. It's threaded through some things, and if you pull it yourself, it just comes out. You have to wait for the other guy. And this TV thing actually combined a couple of experiments in one, but the basic idea is showing you that this guy knows he needs a partner, and not only does he know he needs one, he goes and gets his partner. If
do it on his own,
he opens the door, he pulls a peg out of the door. Right. And so I told you they can work together. And sure enough, there they did. All right. But what is the key to their working together here? Why are they working together well? Because we separated the food for them. We solved the problem of how to share the spoils by putting each of them getting their own little stash of food. And now, in another experimental condition,
help each other.
We're going to put the food in the middle. So now,
will they can't still help each other as humans would?
Now they have to figure out how to share the spoils. This one here is the dominant, and the other one is kind of reluctant.
One of them pulls the blanket. But the dominant chimpanzee grabs all the food.
Okay, and guess what happens on the next trial? The subordinate quits cooperating. So people have asked me, well, if cooperation and collaboration is so useful, why haven't chimps evolved it? And I would say the sort of control variable, the obstacle, is that they can't share the food. So how can you get collaboration going if you can't? They are evolved to solve disputes over food by the dominant just taking what he or she wants. And that doesn't work in this case. You can watch children, and these are two little 3-year-olds. And this is, in this case, they're pulling in the same way. I'm not going to show you the condition where the food's separate. Right in the middle of the thing is 4 gummy bears. And they're going to pull together, and you'll see about how they go about dividing. Actually, the little boy on the right in red is going to kind of act like the dominant chimp, but you'll see the difference. They're pulling in, and now that little boy goes over. But if you can, it's hard to see, but if you look carefully, you see he doesn't take them all. In fact, he took one out and then put it back. Now, the other little boy notices they're none on his side. He comes to the middle. He starts to take them all. And the other little boy says, no. And now they end up with 2 each. It's almost unthinkable to think of chimps where there's a little thing like that where only one hand reaches in. And one of the chimps will reach in and take 2 and leave 2. That's really kind of unthinkable. But these guys can do it all day long. They can do it as long as their parents will let them have gummy bears, however many they'll let them have. That's how many trials they can do this. So they can establish this kind of collaboration as an evolutionarily stable strategy because they know how to divide the spoils at the end. And they divide it 2 by 2 almost every time. And when they don't, one of them will protest, like this little boy says, no. And the other one almost always relents. And so they end up with 2 and 2. Here's one where they pull too hard and it comes down onto the rug. And so I think maybe they think all bets are off. And this little girl takes more than her share. The other little girl protests and she shares. Okay, so they have ways of not only they naturally share equally most of the time, but they have a procedure for working it out if it doesn't go as planned. And now here's one where we really this is one of my favorite studies we've ever done. Here's one where we're going to rig it so that one of them gets more than the other one. Now, I do want to say that we have a control condition here, and I want to just mention that because a lot of you may say 3-year-olds, we know from data that 3-year-olds are not very generous. 3-year-olds are not very generous when they have stuff in their possession. They don't like giving it up. So if they have 4 candies and they say share one with your friend, they're likely to give 1 or 0. But we found a situation where that's not true, and this is collaboration. So we're going to rig it so that one of them gets more than the other, and you'll see what happens. Now watch. 3 to one side and 1 to the other. So they work together. And that little boy hands over 1. Now, he's not just being super nice. If he was super nice, he would give all of them. He doesn't give all of them. He gives 1, so that it's 2 versus 2. One of the reasons it's my favorite study is because the data were so incredibly strong. It was something like 80-something% of the kids shared 1 to equalize in this situation. And in the control condition, where they walked in the room and there were already 3 on one side and 1 on the other, they almost never shared. It was something like 11% or something. So the title of the paper is something like collaboration facilitates equal sharing in children, but not chimpanzees. So we did a version of it with chimps. It's a little bit complicated, but because they don't share so freely in the first place. But we did a version with the chimps. And the key point is that they did not do anything different when the other guy was a collaborator or in the control condition where they just found them there. They did the same thing in both conditions. So they're not being influenced by the fact that this guy is a collaborative partner versus he's just some random guy. And this, we did another version. I'm not going to go into this. It's another version of the same thing. We pull together, only one of them gets the bananas. The chimps don't care if the other guy was a collaborative partner or if he's just a free rider hanging around. They share not so much, but they don't share more when the guy's a collaborative partner than when he's just a free rider. And the children exclude the free riders. So we actually had to, the children, to get what we had to do was the partner would say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to, you get it yourself. And so they put themselves, and then they come and say, oh, I'm ready for some. And they would exclude them under those conditions. So everybody knows that if you look at all the computational models about the evolution of cooperation and everything, one of the key elements is that you got to be able to exclude free riders. You can't let the individuals who cooperate get no more reward than the ones who free ride. Free riders have to be excluded from the spoils. And of course, we know we all have a sense of injustice when people who don't do any work want to share in all the spoils. So, this is just my little diagram that tells me we have a joint commitment to play our roles the way we say we're going to play them, to share the spoils the way we're going to do it, the way we sort of agreed to do it. And then when somebody doesn't, we protest and the other guy has to relent. So this is the normative regulation that when you don't do your part, I say, hey, what are you doing? Come on. And you don't share equally, I say, hey, all right. And you, if you want to stay in my good graces as a collaborative partner, if you don't want me to socially select against you, then you have to say, okay, and you have to share equally or play your role or whatever it is. So we actually have a collaborative regulation of the cooperation, of the collaboration. Young children ask permission to break a commitment. They protest when their partner breaks a commitment, and they apologize or feel guilty if they themselves break a commitment. These are evolved emotions, the feeling of obligation, the feeling of commitment, the feeling of resentment when somebody breaks their commitment, the feeling of guilt when I break my commitment. These are all uniquely human emotions evolved precisely to cement the collaborative process. In my book on the evolution of human morality, I was looking for a catchy little formula, and I came up with this, that sympathy and helping are you over me, equality and fairness are you equal me, and the obligation and normativity are we over me. So it's that if I value our if I value our collaborative partnership, then I have to put the good of the group over my own good, at least in relevant circumstances. And that we can be either a collaborative partner or the cultural group or a larger group. So very briefly, I'm going to wind up here very quickly. the step two is culture, and my sort of thoughts and research here are not so different from other people. What has distinguished our approach has been a focus on this earlier step of collaboration. You don't jump from chimpanzees to human culture. You've got something in between, and it's a more of a proclivity and a skill for collaboration, and all these ability to see the other guy's role, all these emotions and motivations like commitments and so forth. I'm just going to show you one video that shows you the sort of normative attitude. So one of the things that people like Rob Boyd and others have emphasized is that when we start working at the group level, and especially when human groups get very large and you've got a lot of in-group strangers in the group, it's not just that you protest when somebody doesn't collaborate with you, but you enforce social norms from a third-party perspective. So third-party punishment is a big deal when you're getting to these large human groups with modern humans. And third-party punishment means from an outside perspective. So this little boy is just watching, and there's a game that he's been showed how a game is played, and then the puppet comes in and plays the game a different way. He says, it doesn't go like that. It doesn't go like that. No, it doesn't go like that. It doesn't go like that at all. It doesn't go like that. It doesn't go like that. No, it doesn't go like that. Here, you have to take this. Right? Here, you have to take this. So not only is he protesting when when the puppet does it wrong, he's showing the puppet how to do it, right? So this is, I think, the crucial new psychology for group-minded psychology for enforcing collaboration is this third-party enforcing norms from a third-party perspective. And we all know the power of social norms in modern human cultures. And we often, when we break social norms, people don't come out and enforce them and punish us right on the spot. But we know it has reputational consequences, that if we're breaking social norms, that people are going to be gossiping about us behind our back and telling bad stories about us, and we are not going to be perceived as good group members. Sorry, back here, I'm just showing also at the very bottom there that we have a study showing with chimps, no third-party punishment. So the Riedel et al. Study showed that that was a science paper that showed that or was that penis? I don't. Anyway, was the chimp, if somebody stole their food, they retaliated and tried to get it back and retaliated. If they watched while somebody stole a third party's food, so they're just observing from the outside, they never intervened, right? So they didn't engage in this kind of third party punishment or norm enforcement the way that children do. So if we look at development, then we can see again, 1 to 3 year olds, joint intentionality with individuals, dual level collaboration, cooperative communication, which I didn't talk about much here, but you did see the kid communicate to get the adult back in the collaboration, joint commitment, fairness. 3+ years, collective intentionality with the group, cultural conventions, norms, conventional communication, commitment to the group and its norms. And I would like to argue that this is, these are the two steps in the evolution of human cooperation as they manifest themselves in human ontogeny. And that people who study human evolution, you obviously can't jump straight from ontogeny to evolution. I mean, that's ridiculous, but you can look for hints. And in human children, these things hang together as a group. I call this first group sometimes second personal, the joint, because it's with individuals, and then the group comes only later. Then that's a good bet that that's what happened in evolution. So to wrap it up, I'll say that human children are adapted for collaboration in ways that other great apes are not. These adaptations are fundamental to uniquely human processes of cognition, communication, culture, morality. And in ontogeny, a major shift to group-based normative functioning in many domains occurs at around 3 years of age. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll now open it up to questions. So if anyone has a question, feel free to use the raise your hand function, and we'll call on you and you can just ask it out loud, or you can send the question in the chat if your microphone isn't working or you just wouldn't like to speak out, and I can read that out for you. So Matthew?
Hi, you may have mentioned this earlier in the discussion, but I mean, what exactly is making the difference, say, cognitively between the...
Sorry, you cut off.
Can you hear me now? With
Yes,
the,
yes.
I guess the apes have joint intentionality when it's competing, but they don't.
Well, I wouldn't call it joint intentionality. I would say they are reading other minds. So if you want to be generous, they reading other minds when they're competing, but they're not doing anything joint. They're not doing anything as a we together.
Okay, so then what's the difference between that cognitively and the collaborative or the joint intentionality exactly?
Okay. So here, somebody asked me about, couldn't humans have developed all their mind reading type skills and theory of mind and all that in competition? The difference is that in competition, I want to hide my intentions, my goals, and what I'm thinking. I want to hide those from you so I can beat you and outcompete you. In collaboration, I want you to know what I'm thinking. I want you to know where I'm looking. I want to share with you, right? Because that way it'll help us collaborate better. So the difference is that coordination requires us to each try to make our own actions and thoughts open to the other person, and they make them open to us. And then we form a shared goal, and we both know together that we're pursuing this goal together, and that means we have a joint commitment. And if the other guy does something wrong, you're going to call him to task, and if you do something wrong, you're going to feel guilty. So all of those things go with being in a joint intentionality rather than just operating in a group as an individual.
Right. I mean, does it seem like then cognitively, structurally speaking, there's no kind of difference in terms of representational capacity?
No, I would say that little triangle thing that I drew, that's the representation that humans have that apes don't have. It's the dual level where we have a goal, joint goal. We have joint attention on things relevant to the joint goal, but you have your perspective and I have my perspective. I think chimps don't have the notion of a perspective, for example, because they don't have a notion of a shared attention on which we have different perspectives. So I think there is a cognitive difference, that joint intentionality schema is characteristic of humans and not apes.
Okay, thank you. And Sylvain? Oh, I think he may have frozen. So Jeffrey, until Sylvain's signal comes back.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I wanted to ask if there has been any comparative studies done between non-captive chimpanzees in terms of this like cooperative, these cooperative principles, like any more wild populations rather than those which could possibly be influenced by being in a lab environment.
Well, the problem, my colleague Christoph Bosch in Leipzig and I had constant discussions about, because he's a field worker, and he is saying, well, maybe the lab chimps don't have all their capacities or something, but it's hard to do experiments in the wild, and so the wild shows you the real thing. But in the wild, when Christoph would show me an interesting behavior, I would say, wow, that's really interesting. I can think of about 6 hypotheses for what's going on. And I'm an experimentalist by training and by nature. And so I like to do the experiments. So we have our little experimental model. The pulling in the rope thing is the one we used most. And you can say, well, that's nothing like cooperative hunting, forget it. But experiments are always artificial. By definition, they're artificial. We make them up. But we think things like sharing the food, that you can mimic what happens in the wild. So the answer is no, there are no experiments in the wild with wild apes. I will just say one other thing in defense of captive apes. Hans Kummer, who is one of the, who he is, he once gave a talk. He said, he thought his captive apes, his captive baboons and macaques were cleverer than the wild version because they were always being presented with novel circumstances that they'd never faced before in a captive environment. So they were always having to figure out new things. But I'm not going to argue that. But I'll just
very interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think I see Rob's question, but Sylvain, is your signal back? There, I guess not. Yes, Rob.
Rob, long time no see.
Indeed, Mike. Yes, very long time. Good to see you, and thanks. I love the talk. I'm just thinking about the difference in the adults and the children, and adults with the same kind of collaborative behavior play a much more sophisticated game in terms of calculating how much effort relative to the reward. Whereas your children seem to be almost instinctive, that whether the reward is a big one or a little one. So I'm just wondering, developmentally, where does that shift? So there's a much more calculated.
That's very astute of you. Yes. So we actually have a paper arguing that up to about 3 years in traditional societies, 3 years is the age of weaning, right? And so up to 3 years, you're under mother's care and you don't have to worry about your reputation and you don't have to worry about people cheating you because mom's not going to let them cheat you. So 3-year-olds are in this naive bliss of cooperativity. And then once weaning is over and they're out in the real world and peer groups and stuff, they have to worry about being taken advantage of, and they themselves get scheming to take advantage. And so I think we're this early stage in ontogeny is naturally cooperative and sort of naively cooperative and promiscuously cooperative. You get in trouble if you were that cooperative as an adult. And then you have to sort of rein it in and be cautious. And that happens in late preschool and early school age, is where you see kids starting to be more cautious and selective in who they collaborate with and things like that. The study where they excluded free riders, they were 5, for example.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a very good point. And you're right about that. It has to combine. But still, we still have the sense of a commitment, the sense of outrage when somebody breaks their commitments to us, the sense of guilt when we break a commitment. So we're more strategic in perhaps getting some of our own selfish motives, but we still have pretty strong instincts, if you will, for collaborating.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely. And one can see the reasons why from an evolutionary point of view. If you get the strong motivational mechanisms in early, then you can then play with them, but you couldn't really do it the other way around.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
And Sylvain?
Hi, Michael. Thank you for your talk. Can you hear me well? Because
yes, fine.
A couple of internet issues, so I hope the question has not been asked. But just to go back to the chimpanzees, so how would you define the border patrols and the participation of individuals in intergroup encounters if it's not a cooperative action? And if they do not, I mean, I really see it as, you gave the example of the hunts, and I completely understand the individualistic perspective, but how would this apply then to these other forms of collaboration?
Yes, okay, so you're absolutely right. The other, and this relates to the question that was asked about chimps in the wild versus captive chimps. Border patrols, it's hard to think of an experimental method, an experimental model of that in captivity. So what I know, I was in the field with chimps for 1 month. I know that's not much, but I saw like 5 or 6 hunts, and I saw a lot of nut cracking and so forth. And I never saw a border patrol, so I don't really have a feel for them the way I do others. But with the hunting, they don't, for example, recruit partners and then go hunting. It's really very opportunistic. And in the border patrols, it does seem a little bit more like they gather together and then go do a border patrol. So I think that's a really interesting case. And I would guess that part of the problem with the hunting is that your selfish motivations are so high to get that meat. Meat is so prized. And the border patrols, you don't have nearly the motivation to cheat or to do something selfish. So I think border patrols is something that should be studied more. I don't know if you can get an experimental model for it, but maybe there's some field experiment you can do. But I think that's a very good point, that would be a behavior where they might show slightly more cooperative tendencies than otherwise. I don't think they would, get angry at one of the individuals for not doing his job. I don't think they'd feel guilty if they quit. So I'm skeptical that it would be human-like, but maybe it's more in that direction than the cooperative hunting with all the strong selfish motivations that go with food.
Yeah. So if I just may kind of like wrap up on that question. So I work with Thai chimpanzees, and I was in Leipzig. So yes, of the patrol, the thing is, like, what's really striking is that most of the individuals in Thai, they just go and participate. And so like these free riders, we would expect more of them to go, to not go on patrol technically. And intergroup encounters are a bit more similar to what we would see with hunts, where individuals' roles when it comes to confronting another group can be quite different, with like more individuals on the front and some are on the back and things like this. But the patrol is like the form of coordination is really striking.
It is, but the hunt is more like a stag hunt kind of motivation situation. But the patrol is more like a snowdrift or a volunteer's dilemma or whatever. So if nobody does it, it won't get done. So if only one guy starts to go off and the clock is ticking, if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it, kind of thing. So the motivational structure is a little bit different than it's in these snowdrift problems or volunteer's dilemma, there comes a point where I would rather do it myself than it not get done.
Yeah, sure.
And so I don't know enough about the actual logistics of how the Border Patrol gets formed. But yeah, okay. It's a very good point, and you should study those more.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I just have one question, and then I guess we can wrap up with Marcos, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly, during the same life history stages, chimpanzees and humans are doing very different things, like when they're infants. But humans also have the additional life history stage, or distinct one, of childhood. And I know you said you weren't too interested in like the fine tunings of when we like evolve certain collaborative capabilities. But I guess if you'll entertain this one, if you were to try to more precisely fine tune when certain cognitive capabilities or collaborative behavior evolve, do you think you could, by tracking when childhood first emerged or over what time childhood was lengthened, you could begin to infer when certain cognitive abilities may have evolved or when certain behaviors may have evolved?
Yeah. Sarah Hurdy and Kristen Hawkes have talked a lot about this kind of thing. There are some. I know some of the people in human evolution in Leipzig from the Jean-Jacques Houblon group have looked at skulls and like to see when this extended ontogeny came. So apes have, by the time they're 2 years old, their brain is something like 90% of its adult size. And with humans, their brains aren't 90% of adult size till they're like 8 years old or something. So things really slowed down. And you would think that really slowing down would be associated with something like a cultural group where we can have cooperative childcare. I would say, and also we need a longer childhood to learn all of these cultural things. I mean, look how long it takes people to learn to be a member of a cultural group in a traditional society to learn how to hunt. It's really in the late teenagehood before they're really good at it and making sophisticated tools and stuff. So one of the things about culture is it takes a long time to learn it, and you need to be taken care of by the group. So for sure, I would think this would be associated with culture at the very latest. Whether it would be associated with hominins from 1 million or 500,000 years ago, I don't know. I don't think it would necessarily have to be.
Great, thank you. And Marcos?
Hi, and thank you. That was a really interesting talk. My question was about collaboration on activities that are not so geared towards subsistence or survival. So a lot of work and collaboration is to do with food and shelter and defense. And I wonder if you had any thoughts on the evolutionary mechanisms why people may collaborate to allow, say, for a community to, as we have from the Middle Paleolithic, to get eggshell beads or other exotic materials. So materials that are not immediately justifiable as subsistence or survival. Why do people collaborate to make that possible? Or do you think that's just competition driving it?
No, I think that's why I started out my talk talking about mutualism. I think you can have situations that are mutualistic and they are characterized by social selection. So let's say beads, you said beads, right? So things like
that's a recent example that's now.
Okay. So let's say we're doing something to either collect them or make them or go to another group and get them in a trade. If we work together to do that, and then I hog them all, okay, you're not going to go bead hunting with me again. So I think the logic is the same as with these subsistence activities, but the subsistence activities, the selfish motives for cheating are much stronger. But I think they're still there for these other things, and that's why the Border Patrol was an especially good example with the apes, because the selfish motive is just to free ride. It's not to get hog stuff for myself, either food or beads or whatever, but it's that I'm too lazy to go let them go defend the territory and I'll just take a nap. Those are ones where there's no material thing involved, and there would be a case where you might the logic, it's a collective action problem where everyone, their selfish motive is to free ride, to take a nap. But if I don't do it, if nobody does it, it's not going to get done. So maybe I have to participate at some point. So I think that's the logic is that if everybody free rides, it's not going to get done. It's a collective action problem. But I think free riding versus selfishly cheating provide different motivations. They're both threats to collaboration, but you're absolutely right. The ones where it's subsistence and all, the motivation to cheat and let your selfish motives win is much stronger, and therefore it does present more of a challenge.
Thank you.
And I noticed one more question which was sent in the chat about 10 minutes ago, which I missed. So it's sent by Harry Hall, and Harry is asking, does the capacity to imitate or incapacity to imitate affect the ability to collaborate?
I believe that the collaboration of the human type evolved before any really strong. I mean, yes, they're still socially learning like chimps do, which is not nothing. They're socially learning, but the really strong, uniquely human capacities for imitation with normative conformity and with teaching and all of that, those are going to be later, I think, with modern humans. So I think it really, the imitation really helps and gives it a boost, but I don't think it's necessary to get it going.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So next week we'll also be hosting a talk at the same time, and please check our social media and website for more postings. But thank you very much, Professor Tomasello, for agreeing to give this talk and giving such an interesting and stimulating talk. And thank you everyone for attending.
All right, thank you.